Pursuant to the provisions of Section 2.68.030 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, please take notice that decisions of the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County Community Oversight Board may be appealed to the Chancery Court of Davidson County for review under a common law writ of cert. Any appeal must be filed within 60 days after entry of a final decision by the board. Any person or other entity considering an appeal should consult with an attorney to ensure that time and procedural requirements are met. We do have quorum this afternoon. In my chair remarks, all I wanted to touch on was the executive committee that we had this month. We didn't vote on anything. We just mainly discussed this budget document that was handed to you right before the meeting started. And this, I think, is a pretty exciting document. It shows what we're requesting, which includes 2 new investigators, a professional specialist, a social worker, and a public information coordinator as well. There's one correction that needs to be made to the number at the end where it says fiscal year 2022-2023. Is that correct, Director Fitchard?
No, that's incorrect. So the totals, we added in a special assistant to the director, which an additional $72,000. So the total salaries with fringe was $518,776, and so the total for the fiscal year 2022-2023 or 2023 would be 2.084.
So I know you just received this document a few minutes ago, but if you have a chance to look it over during the meeting, please let us know if you have any questions. Again, that was just mostly what we discussed during the executive committee meeting this month. I will move on to the approval of the minutes. There's a motion to approve the minutes. Thank you, Dr. Hildreth. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Abdullah. Any edits to the minutes? Any focused discussion there? If not, all in favor of approving the minutes say aye. Any opposed? No. Thank you. Now we can proceed to Dr. Villier with the annual report discussion.
I'll be working over on the display, and Mr. Crowell Williams will be leading this portion.
Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, board members. It's a pleasure to be here presenting to you. So for much of this month, Dr. Villier, Director Fitchard, and myself have been working on this year's annual report for the board. We sent the report to you last week, and I hope you've had a chance to review it. It is focused on highlighting the accomplishments of the board, in addition to the challenges that the board and more broadly the city of Nashville faced in 2021. It's also meant to highlight the work of MNCO's staff and the work we've done to further the mission of the board. With that said, we welcome any feedback you have on the report. I'd like to thank Member Hayes, whose helpful feedback we've already implemented into the version that we all have in front of us. And with that, I do want to highlight several changes we've made. This is an updated document that we have changed since we sent the board the version on Friday. One, we felt the report was not in a particularly cohesive order, so we've done some reordering to better reflect the priorities of the board. We've also added section headers to break up the report a little bit. Rather than saying outgoing members, we changed that section title to COB members whose terms are expiring, because to call them outgoing members would have implied that they are not returning, which is not necessarily the case. We've also updated and cleaned some of the maps to improve readability. And yeah, there's a bunch of other minor changes, but those are the really substantive ones. So if you do want to give feedback, please do so either now or by email. I will note our poor printer had a hard time printing out enough copies of this for all of us, so the colors look pretty bad on this. We'll email you an updated version that looks better, but the substance is here. And it is important to note that this report is due to the state legislature by February 1st, which is next Tuesday. So to that end, if you have any feedback on the report beyond what is shared tonight, Dr. Villier and I ask that you please share it with one of us by close of business tomorrow, if possible, so that we have time on Friday to get those changes implemented. And yeah, with that, I'll open to any feedback the board has now, but if you have none now, again, please do email us by close of business tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Crowell-Williamson. Any feedback, any edits you'd like to make to the annual report? Dr. Hildreth? Uh-oh. I don't have. I think they're going to have to come.
Okay, thank you. I apologize. First of all, please let me thank you and the staff for an excellent report. I really appreciate the level of detail that was very descriptive in sharing what work both the board, the staff has done and the board has considered. Having said that, I tried to do my homework and be prepared to, I had a question on what was, I'm going to have to refer to the old page because your pages of the firearm report, for example, it was at page 31 of the document we were sent. I haven't been able to find it immediately. I sort of had a data interpretation question, and that is there was demographics of officers and subjects of officer shootings, and percentages were given, but not the number of individuals. So I'm asking, could we also have the N number so we have a sense of magnitude in addition to proportionality that is given with the percentages? But other than that, that really was about the only thing that jumped out to me. I think that this is excellent, and I appreciate the work. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your comments. We appreciate it. For what it's worth, the firearm report now begins on page 39, and that is definitely a doable change. I'll make a note and change that tomorrow. Thank you.
Any other feedback on the annual report? If there is none, then we can move to the executive director's report. And when do we need to have feedback in? If we close the business tomorrow, if you see anything while you're reviewing it tonight, as I'm sure you will be, please get in your feedback before close of business tomorrow.
All right, the January 2022 COB Director's Monthly Report. We'll start with the office. We have a personnel update. Assistant Director Clausey resigned on January 7th. He went to work in the private sector in human resources management. We're reposting the community liaison position this month. They added some new criteria to the posting. So I just got that information this week, and so I'm working on that to get that so that we can repost that hopefully next week. I have an interview for an administrative assistant. I thought I was going to make an offer to a person, and then she said that she took another position somewhere else. So I have an interview scheduled this week, and hopefully we can get an administrative assistant in to help us with the work that's piling up. Myself and the staff took some training with NACO, implicit bias training for law enforcement in the current state of the field. And I also attended the Council on Criminal Justice's virtual webinar, Saving Lives, 10 Essential Action Cities to Take to Reduce Violence. There was an executive committee meeting this month on the 18th, as well as a budget committee meeting on the 20th. And those meetings, we can talk a little bit about the budget portion. I think that to highlight the information that I gave you today, and I'll get to that at the end of the report. The research team spent most of their time working on this annual report, and like they said a few minutes ago, it's due on February the 1st, and we like to get this to them on time because they actually don't give us an extension of that time. So we want to get it to them on the 31st, not the 1st, or even sooner if we can. We haven't done a lot of outreach this month because we just had so many changes and it was a short month. But I will say that the COB legal advisor, Attorney Daniel Yoon, and one of the investigators, April Williams, they did a continuing legal education presentation today. And I thought that went really well. There was a lot of feedback. It was attorneys from the community, some judges were also there. So, and they just kind of learned about our process and, some of our highlights for the year, as well as how to file complaints. We've been really working hard on, and you guys asked for the agent report the last time, and we've been really working hard on trying to figure out how we're going to get through the investigations and how to go through the agent report, find out what cases are, that need to move forward really quickly, just kind of get an idea on how long it's been taking our investigators to get through these cases. And what I realized is that some of them are doing, and it's just, I don't think it's something that they've thought about in a whole lot, but working a little bit on each one is not getting things done in a way that I think if we do a procedure more like a snowball effect, where you just spend most of your time working on one case instead of picking up and touching cases and doing a little bit here and a little bit there. So Attorney Daniel Yoon and I are going to be working on a process on how we can get through these and find out which cases that we need to move rapidly on. I mean, those director-initiated complaints, I think, are the ones that, for me, are the most prevalent because they're the ones that involve use of force cases. And so as I looked through those, I was able to determine that, there's some, he's already received 2. There's one that's on hold. There's a couple that we haven't been able to get in contact with people. They might need to be closed out. So we just need to get through these, figure out a process. We're going to be working and meeting with them on Monday so that we can clear out those aging cases. We continue to receive complaints. We received 5 this month in these last 3 weeks. And we've taken multiple calls that weren't complaint calls for service. I've received a couple myself about trash, so we're still receiving those calls as well. We haven't had any issues with any type of requests for reports. And of course, we're presenting 3 resolution reports today. I will attend the Force Review Board. That will happen on February the 10th. And as far as updates on the force review, I think as I talked to you about this probably for the last few months, on those director-initiated cases, we really need to do audits of those cases. That would help us get through those cases, and at that point, we would be able to determine whether or not we need to do an investigation. So for instance, if you're going through the process and you determine that maybe a witness something wasn't addressed, then that's when you decide to go forward on an investigation. TBI has been conducting those investigations. They have been very thorough. I went through them myself and listened to all the tapes, and it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of documents. But I always like to prepare myself before the use of force hearings and go through each one of those files. And so, if there's something there that needs to be done, then I would address that with our investigative staff. But at this point, that hasn't happened. So. We do evaluate every piece of document, every piece of information that is in that file. I did want to talk a little bit about the proposed resolution reports, and when you look at those reports, our investigative report is very lengthy, and this is a confidential document. So you're getting the summary of this document here. This document is 18 pages long. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that, but you guys are always welcome to come to the office to review that information. And we will talk about some other, at the end of this report, I'll take questions about that. Of course, you know about the license plate readers, myself, Board Member Hayes, the research analysts. We all attended the special called council committee meeting. That was on Friday, January the 14th. And they were having a discussion between Councilmember Rosenberg's legislation as well as Councilmember Johnston's legislation. Rosenberg's legislation, BL 2021-84, was indefinitely deferred, and Councilmember Johnston's legislation, BL 2021-961, moved forward to a third reading. Also, Board Member Nguyen shared some ALPR policy and guidelines drafted by the IACP, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, with board members and staff, because that was something that we discussed in the last month's meeting, and that information was really helpful. We hadn't decided whether or not we were going to move forward on having the gentleman who created that, who was the policy person for the IACP, come to our next meeting. So if that's something that the board still wants to do and hear from him, then, Mr. Nguyen said that he would try to facilitate that for us. And I also sent to you the body-worn camera audits that Commander Laura sent over. That was something that came up in our last meeting in regards to how those audits were conducted with the body-worn camera program, which I don't like to call it a program because I would like to think that they're going to always have body-worn cameras. But that information is included in my report and what he sent over on how they're conducting their audits and what that looks like. And that information was helpful as well because I wasn't aware of that. The CPA, just for those, I think everyone has attended the CPA, but if you haven't, they're going to host another one on Monday, February the 28th, 2022. That will be a 12-week training session. And then I also was told that if you can't make that one, they would have another one in September. But remember, the requirement is that you have to get it done in the first 12 months. So if you haven't taken it, then you need to sign up for this February meeting. It's budget season for us, and that process will begin on February the 11th. We're supposed to have all of our information up. It's either February the 11th or the 14th, have all the information uploaded into their new system that I've been taking trainings on. I'm still not super familiar with them, and I don't think that's unique to me. It's just a brand new system that they're using to upload all of the budget information. It's a new software, so I'll be working with our budget team at Metro to get that done so that we can, of course, really have a discussion about the ask that we want. That's why that information was given to you, and then we'll talk a little bit about what happened in the budget committee, because I think the information that I shared in the budget committee, we sat down, I'll just go ahead and talk about that. So the budget committee was, we met and we discussed, this form was created by Dr. Valier after a discussion on the positions that we needed, or the positions that I would like to have for this budget season. We talked about each position and why they were needed in our office. We talked about how the budget season is going to look and how that looks on, and even the funding for our office. Of course, I've been talking for the last few months about the reason why we need more investigators. We just can't handle the caseload with 3 investigators. And even when Mr. Clausey, when he did some of them, it still wasn't enough because he had other duties to handle. And so what I've learned is if one investigator is out for any length of time, it just is going to create another backlog. And so with COVID out, with other responsibilities, and, we have relied heavily on 3 investigators to get all of this work done. And if you look at the agent report, you see that 3 is not enough. We know that having 3 investigators is not enough because we know that other jurisdictions around this country have already said that for the amount of people that we have in the police department and sworn officers, that most departments have anywhere from 5 to 8 investigators. And we started with 3. We were out 1 for almost a year because of hiring freeze. And so we're requesting 2 more in this position. We also looked at a public information coordinator and the community liaison. So in those 2 positions, we really had a whole lot of duties for the community liaison to do. To be the PIO, to be the community liaison, to be the web person and manager. And I just think it's too many duties for the costs and the salary. And it's just too many things to do that it just is not going to be done effectively. So we're asking for a public information coordinator and a manager. And if we can't get a social media manager, we can at least have the public information coordinator doing that job until we can get a person that strictly does our social media. That has been lacking, in my opinion. I haven't been able to keep up with the social media. And that's the only way that we reach some of our constituents. Like, that's the only way they find us. They're not coming to a meeting during this pandemic. And so having someone to update that stuff every day, or at least a couple times a week, and putting content on there that people want to know in regards to what's happening in policing in Nashville, what's happening in policing nationally, I think is very important. So that's one of our asks. A professional specialist, if you see that, that's on page 2. The professional specialist is a person who, as I was going through looking at the categories for positions, I realized that a professional specialist is the person that we need to handle the body-worn camera audits. If we have to do those audits, we can't rely on 2 research analysts to do that work. So we need a professional specialist. We can call it that, if we want to call it an information tech person, but it would fall under the category of a professional specialist. And that is, I think, still an ASO4 position in how Metro creates their positions. And the professional specialist, if in fact we end up doing auditing for the LPRs, they would also fall under that category. So I'm thinking if we can find one person or 2, right now we're just asking for 1, to handle that type of work, and also somebody with a background in auditing as well as an IT person to do that in-house. So that's where the professional specialist comes in at, and then of course the social work senior is a position that I talked about for a long time now, for at least 3 or 4 months, in regards to helping the families of people who have been shot and killed by the Metropolitan Police Department. They have called. I've been getting calls this week, actually, and after Christmas, when people are experiencing, the feeling and the loss of their loved one, I have been getting calls. And so I think it's important that we have someone who can help facilitate a go in between and help those people find some resources in the city as it pertains to counseling and therapy or whatever needs they have. And so that social work specialist or social work senior in our office would be that person that would be connected and create partnerships within the community on getting therapy and counseling services to those who are having or experiencing loss in that way. And so the budget impact. And we also, I think, so there was another position that I thought would be helpful for us, the special assistant to the director. It is a job that it's a category that has opportunity for supervision. So that person in the office could actually supervise the community liaison, the administrative assistant, and some other positions. A lot of the positions that Metro has already on the books don't necessarily have supervisory components added in. And so what that would do is that would give us in our office, the people who work in our office, some opportunity for growth. So they could have a position and then also have some opportunity to supervise others. Because I can't supervise everyone. There's no way that I can continue to supervise 6, 7, 8 people and then check all of those duties and boxes off too. So that would be helpful to us. That would also give us, of course, that's going to increase our staff. That's an added position, so it'd be 6 positions. And so that is why the ask and the salary with fringe bumped up some. So was there anything else? I'm sure I missed some things. Dr. Hildreth, from the meeting, from the Budget Committee meeting?
No, thank you, Director Fitchard. And I'm going to ask the other committee members to chime in. There were 3 of us present there. One of the things that we discussed that seemed very productive was thinking about, as you have the rationale here so beautifully laid out, the notion of indexing. Mm-hmm. That is, if this is happening in one area of Metro government, what's the proportional budgetary response that ought to be built in almost automatically so that once the justification is understood by the public, mm-hmm. and the public decision makers, it'll go up. And specifically around that workload of investigators, we asked the question, what's the number of investigators in the OPA unit in the police department? You have here the number of police officers, but how many investigators do they have to watch the police officers? And I think that the number was around 8, and we're hearing that our number is 3 now. And so one of the things that we also talked about in committee is that public budgeting is sometimes a marathon and not a sprint. So needing 8 today doesn't mean we're going to get 8 today, and it may not be wise to ask for, an increase up to 8 today. But if we understand that's the goal, that might be a standing budget protocol for this board over the next 3 years to say within 3 years or less, the MNCO will obtain parity, investigator parity, with OPA. And one of the reasons I mention that is we see later in our agenda that a number of us have terms that are about to expire. We may or may not come back. We should hope that we continue to have turnover on this board so that when there are long-term plans that need to be executed, it's very important to be able to identify those, name them, and have them not dependent just on the whims or the understanding of the individuals who are sitting here. So I thank you for leading that discussion. I thank the board members who also participated, and I hope that this is going to be productive and helpful as we go forward.
Thank you.
Mr. Holloway.
From my understanding, I thought the police department had some people on retainer they could call out in crisis situation. The different ministers I've met in the past, they would call out, I think Reverend Duke, this sworn officer that is supposed to be spearheading that. So you might need to talk with them about that, if someone you can call out in a crisis situation to talk to a family in those type of situations. And also, what kind of budget are you talking about? If all these things you mentioned today that you need, what kind of budget would you need?
So to address your first thing is, I think Officer Duke, I think he retired this year or last year. And I know that he was the chaplain. I met him once or twice. And so, yeah, he was very helpful. I don't know who the replacement chaplain is at this point. I haven't checked into that, though, but I need to know that. And then secondly, the budget, we need, for me, it would be great if we could get all these positions filled. But I think that is a little premature. But what would be important, I think, is getting the investigators for sure and a social worker in our office for sure. We definitely need that because I do believe that I don't know what's going to happen. Hopefully we won't have as many shootings as we had last year. But if if we had 10 shootings and if all of those people called for service from us, there is no way that I would be able to help them personally as one person in my office. So those are what I think are the most important asks, which would be the investigators and the social worker at this point, and maybe even a special assistant to the director.
Mr. Nguyen. Mr. Brown, Mr. Nguyen, Mr. Hayes, then Mr. Witzel.
Yeah, I fully support what the Budget Committee is recommending, and hopefully we can get the majority of them. One question I have is, and I'm sure you all have considered it, I just don't see it here. If we get these added positions, are we in a position to get space to accommodate them? Because I know we've got some limitations, and I understood there was a wall that could be moved, but I'm wondering if we get them, we need space. We need space to house them.
Yeah, that's a very, very important question. So we do have some space or opportunities for space in the Washington Square building where we are now. Personally, just in being really frank with you, I don't think that that's a location that is really to me, it doesn't really, it's not that accessible to the community, okay? I do think that there's some problems in the fact that the building in itself, the district attorney's office is housed there, as well as Metro Legal. My concern has been that if constituents or people, complainants that come, that they would encounter police officers in the elevator and when they're going to duty, or they may encounter them, you know, or they may encounter district attorneys who may have charged them. And so I have been thinking about that and thinking of where else could we have a location that is on a bus line that takes into the needs of the community, the transportation issue, the parking issue. There's absolutely no parking there. We have thought about, of course, if we have people come to validate their parking, you know, and I don't, you know, but at the end of the day, there isn't, even when I have people come in for interviews, I have to like try to finagle on where they can park. And many of you have been there and know that the parking is a big issue. So I think that where we are is great, but over long term and having a place where we can actually call home without all of these accessibility issues is a problem. And so I have been thinking about where we could go in the city. And I don't know, Metro Center was one of my first thoughts. I thought it's on the bus line. It is in the community. And I think people would be more, I think it'd be easy and accessible, and people would be more inclined to come to there.
Mr. Nguyen.
Yeah, the standards for, the standards for case assignment for criminal investigators around the country, this is just from recollection, which I'm not sure whether you can compare to what you all do. 20 or 30 per month is a heavy caseload for a criminal investigator. I've assigned up to 100 in some cases. But that's a manageable just for a criminal investigation.
Right.
Now, there's a National Organization of Internal Affairs Investigators, and they set sometimes a standard for internal affairs investigators, which the numbers are always lower because it's a different kind of investigation. I don't know anybody, because it's such a new thing, who has set a standard for case assignments for oversight boards. There may be, and NACO may have some ideas on that. So I can make some inquiries to the Internal Affairs Association to ask them what they recommend for a police department. So that's one thing I'll offer. And the other two, it just seems to me when I read through this budget, and I think about what this board does, above and beyond what's written in the mission statement of the board, this board to me is also about liability management. And when you've got a civilian oversight board looking at the day-to-day performance and behavior of law enforcement, what we do here raises the standard for the police department. So every liability lawyer in the country will tell you that what raises your standard lowers your liability risk. And what lowers your liability risk raises your standard for performance in law enforcement. So it seems to be a small price to pay to have a liability management organization, the COB, to make sure that law enforcement doesn't find themselves in a multi-million-dollar lawsuit over excessive force. Because most of the lawsuits in the country today are when police do too much search, too much arrest, too much force, too much restraint. So, and this is what this board reviews day in and day out. So the budget committee, listening to your plea for more money, should understand that they're paying a small price for a big payoff in the end to keep the city out of a major lawsuit.
I agree with you. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Nguyen. Mr. Hayes.
I just wanted to speak briefly to the.
Your microphone.
I just wanted to speak briefly to the issue of the social worker versus the chaplain. Those are really two different roles. And one of the things with the social worker that I think we're talking about here, this is someone that's outside of the police department. And I do think we can agree that there are members of the community that have been contacting already the COB. So there's a level of trust there. So that's one thing, but also with the chaplain versus the chaplain, the social worker can direct people to services. There's so many other things that the social worker can do versus just looking at things from a theological point of view. But the social worker, I definitely think we need a social worker for this department, or this board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. Mr. Witzel.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that in the committee meeting, we discussed with the community liaison position that we have, we talked about how there were, of course, pockets of the city that we're not reaching. And once we get to the point where we are reaching those people and building those relationships, and we particularly pointed out immigrant communities as well, it's very likely that the workload is going to go up when more people get more comfortable and more people are know that we're here. And so that is just another argument for hiring the two investigators that we need. So I just wanted to note that.
Thank you.
One thing that you can do, which we had to do at one time on the police department, is to compare Nashville with other cities its size for as a pay rate and look at the workload. And what you'll have to do is find out the cities that have an oversight board pretty much comparable to Nashville and see what kind of staff they have and put that in writing so you can justify what you need. And I think that will go a long way.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Director Fitchard?
Oh, I got to finish this report.
Okay.
So, sorry. I met with John Bunton and Chief Drake on Wednesday, January the 12th. In that meeting, we discussed topics related to normal, how are we, how we're getting along, how are things progressing. I thought it was a good meeting. We have decided to probably meet once a month, hopefully once a month and not more than that. But I think that there was an agreement at the meeting that we would meet once a month to discuss these issues. And so I thought that that went well, and I thought that that would be a good step in the right direction for us so that we can address issues face-to-face. And we hadn't had the opportunity to do that, and so that went really well. There's a department head meeting. It was scheduled for tomorrow. I think it's been canceled. And then there is this meeting, a stakeholder meeting that's open to the public on Thursday, February the 3rd, and that's the Mmpd CIT co-response team. There's a meeting at North Precinct, so if anyone is interested or has any information that they want me to pass along or find out any information, let me know, because I was added to that committee as a stakeholder. We talked about board members who are expiring. We have had calls for people who want to get information on how to be nominated or to be on the committee, on the board. So that's been interesting. And then, of course, in this report I talk about the survivor resources, and we've kind of went over that pretty lengthy. And then I'm a member of the task force for the Vision Zero Task Force. There has been an increase in pedestrian deaths in this city. This month, actually, there's been several pedestrian deaths, and it's always, when I see that, I'm always shocked at as many pedestrians who are killed walking or crossing intersections. There's, because of whatever issues. But if you didn't get a chance to join the public forum, there's still an opportunity for you to voice your opinion about that, whether it's sidewalks, if there's some type of safety issues that you want, speed control in neighborhoods or whatever, that is still open for you to voice your concern about that. And so that concludes my director's report, and I'll take any other questions if you have any.
Mr. Campbell-Gooch.
Thank you for this, and this director's report is amazing. There's a lot of good things in here. Also, glad to hear about the successful meeting with the chief and John Bunton. I would also request that the board be informed if those meetings stop? Oh, I would also request personally that the board be informed if those meetings stop or abrupt end. But my question was around the body-worn camera audits. I noticed in there that they talked about the audits are to look for like training concerns. And I'm not sure if you can answer this or Captain Laura, but I'm curious what happens if somebody who's reviewing the body cam footage notice something that is wrong. Who do they report to? And is there also a role for the COB to be a part of that process officially? Yeah, no, it's all good. So I noticed on the piece about the body-worn camera footage audits, there's a, it talks about when the folks who are doing the auditing, they're looking for training holes and training concerns. My question is what is the procedure when someone who is viewing the footage notices something that is more than a training concern? Almost could possibly be a complaint or some sort of violation. And then my second question is there a role that the COB can play in that whole situation?
Sorry. Good afternoon. Thank you. So that's a great question. I don't have the exact process that they have, but I can tell you that everybody who reviews them are supervisors. So it's only supervisors that are reviewing, sergeants and above, that are reviewing these body-worn camera footage. And what will happen is if they see something that needs to be addressed, they will analyze the tape or analyze the footage and figure out what needs to be done. Is this a training issue? Is this a complaint issue or something that needs to be addressed? And then they will go to the proper staff. It's either the commander, they think it's something that needs to be dealt with, OPA, they feel that needs to be dealt with, whichever way, and they'll go to that person or that division or unit and address it that way. But again, they'll go by our policies and figure out what kind of policy violation this is or what kind of issue it is, and then they'll address it the way they feel is best. Always talking to their supervisors to make sure that they choose the right method of addressing the situation. So, and then your second question, that's something that would probably be best discussed with the staff, with Chief Drake and the staff, of how to deal with those, I guess, situations where the board may be involved somehow. But again, if it's something where there's a violation of policy, I'm sure that at one point or another you'll know about it. So,
thank you for that. And my next thing is a comment, and I want to go back to something that we worked on before. I think board member Martinez was there, but I want to say former board member Sweeney brought this up, and I think they were talking about how if there's circumstances where a police officer needs to whistleblow and actually file a complaint against another police officer, and I think we still have some thinking to do around that, because I'm thinking about an extreme circumstance where an officer might see something that that person might not want to tell another officer, type of deal. So I just wanted to hold that there. But other than that, thank you for that answer. It gave me a lot of information.
Thank you, Mr. Kamlaguch. Any other question for Director Fitchard on the Executive Director's report? If there is none, we can move to the proposed resolution reports.
So I want to start off by saying that as we move into these resolution reports that deal with officers' use of force, it's important that the board, I think, take into consideration what's in these reports, but also if you get an opportunity to look over the investigative report, because it's going to include a whole lot more information. I think it's important that we are mindful of what's included in this as we make decisions on these reports. I looked over them, I've read them, and I'm ready when you all. Go ahead.
Dr. Hildreth.
Thank you. Before we start, I just wanted to know if we could state on the record that the portions of the PRR reports that are available to the public are on the official website.
Correct.
And that, as we mentioned in the last meeting, you kind of have to know how to find them. I think it's very important because we do have people who are following along at home, that if you want to see these documents, please go to the Community Oversight Board, click on Metro Government.
Yes.
Then you go to the navigation, there's a red tab on the left, and when you open that up, there is something that says Proposed Resolution Reports. When you click on that and it goes down, then you can follow along, and you can see from our agenda that I think you're going to be announcing the report number before we start, so you can click on that and follow along. Thank you for indulging, but I think it's important that until we have something that is more easily marked on the website space itself, that we want to help people follow along with the detail that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hildreth. Mr. Campbell-Gooch?
The only thing I wanted to say, and I wanted to comment about the when you brought up possibly finding another space. Personally, as a board member, it's like you said, it's difficult to get down there to actually see these reports. As a board member who doesn't have reliable or constant transportation, if we were in Metro Center, I could actually walk to see these. So I think that's also to keep in mind, especially as we bring more community members into this space.
Yes.
Mr. Goddard?
Yes, following up on that, I had some concerns about, I didn't have time, started it too late in the process to see more about the one report in particular, the 002 report. I look back, I did have time to look back at the rules and all. It's clear that we can't, board members can't do their own investigations, can't bring in new facts that haven't been considered by the staff. We can't go find some document, we can't get a witness statement, that sort of thing. But anything that is part of the staff's investigation is fair game for consideration by the board. We can ask the executive director questions. If we looked at the file, we could suggest something else be brought in. And I believe, we'll have to have Legal Advisor Yoon's thoughts on this. I believe it would be fine for, in most cases, for us to have access to the full report, emailed or downloadable with password or something, the full investigation report, and much easier than having to go to the office and almost certainly only some of us having had taken the time to do that. It doesn't fix anything we're considering today, but going forward, it would sure be great if all the board could have access to those full reports.
Yeah, I talked to Attorney Yoon about that, and we had, right before the meeting, we haven't had a serious long-term discussion on a solution to that, because like of course, we talked about some of the records are confidential, and so, but the things that aren't confidential, the possibility of maybe making that available to you in a different way so that you don't have to come to the office, especially during the pandemic right now, it's probably going to be difficult. And like I said, this investigative report connected to this case is 18 pages long. And you're getting, of course, the way that we present them to you is different. So he's going to be working on that because it is in our rules. And figure out a way that we can make certain that you guys have accessibility to the records.
Okay. Thank you.
That are not confidential.
All right.
Mr. Hayes?
I just wanted to concur with what Member Campbell-Gooch said about office space. This board is, as is in its name, Community Oversight Board. So one of the goals was for this board to be accessible to the community. So I think when we go the next step as far as office space, it would be great to have something that's more accessible to the community. And right now, Second Avenue is not the place for the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. We can proceed, Director Fitchard. We can continue on now.
Okay. All right, I'm going to be presenting to you a director-initiated case, D 2020-002. It is a complaint from an unarmed complainant involving 2 police officers. The allegations were in the early evening of May 13th, 2020. The complainant was tasered by one officer and both tasered and shot by another in the front yard of the complainant's home. The complainant was treated for his injuries and is alive. The MNCO investigated the 2 officers involved for allegations of excessive use of force and adherence to policy regarding tasers. Our investigation found that Officer 1 and Officer 2 were initially called to the complainant's home due to a 911 call alleging domestic violence. Upon the officer's arrival, the officers pointed guns at the complainant because they believed he had been evading their arrest in his car. The complainant reported that he did not see the officers until he was parked in front of his home. After a brief period of time during which the officers state the complainant was yelling and they were trying to get his attention, Officer 1 tells Officer 2 to switch to less lethal, which meant to holster her pistol and draw her taser. The complainant is never alleged to have been in possession of a weapon. The complainant states that he told the officers, "Why don't you put the guns away so we can talk?" and stepped toward the middle of the street so that, as he described it, they could see that he was not trying to be a threat, because he believed going forward, the house would be perceived as sketchy. It is at this time when the complainant is walking into the street that Officer 2 tases the complainant. Officer 2 reported the complainant's attention initially being focused on Officer 1, and when she looked down to see why her taser wasn't unholstering, she looked up and the complainant was walking toward her, which is why and when she deployed her taser. After that, the complainant pulls the taser prongs from his chest and throws them at Officer 1's feet, who had slipped and fallen on some loose gravel, though admittedly no fault of the complainant. Officer 1 states that he and the complainant are involved in some kind of altercation for about 30 seconds, where he is still on the ground and keeping his legs between him and the complainant. During the time while Officer 1 is on the ground, Officer 1 holsters his gun and draws his taser out. He did not believe himself to be in imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury, and felt it was reasonable to holster his firearm and attempt a different force method. Officer 2, on the other hand, draws her pistol and shoots the complainant in the leg without giving any commands or warnings. She stated she believed the complainant was walking toward Officer 1 and believed Officer 1 to be in imminent risk of serious bodily injury, and shooting the complainant to be immediately necessary to stop the threat. During her interview with the MNCO, she stated, "I didn't let the complainant get that close to Officer 1 when I took the shot. As soon as the complainant lost focus from my direction to walk toward Officer 1, I just shot. I couldn't tell you how far he was from him. All I know, as soon as he turned to walk toward him, I took my shot." Officer 2 also stated, "My reasoning for pulling out my weapon is because my partner was still on the ground and the complainant was still acting erratic and was focused back on Officer 1. MMPD use of force policy is that authorized employees shall only use that force that is reasonably necessary to effect lawful objectives, and authorized employees may use deadly force when they have a reasonable belief that the action is immediately necessary to prevent imminent death or serious bodily injury of a human being. Here, Officer 2 may have sincerely believed Officer 1 was in some risk or harm, but our conclusion is it was simply not reasonable under the circumstances and based on the evidence and testimony reviewed. Officer 2's belief that the complainant was erratic and that she didn't know what the complainant might do is not a reasonable belief that shooting the complainant was immediately necessary to prevent imminent death or serious bodily injury to Officer 2, and that it is not within policy regarding the use of deadly force. Based on our investigation, I sustain the allegations that Officer 2 violated MMPD's use of force and 2 taser policy violations regarding testing and deployment. I did not sustain the allegation that Officer 1 violated use of force, but I do sustain a violation of taser policy against him. In the MMPD Manual 11.10.080, officers are instructed to give a verbal warning of taser, to alert other personnel that the taser is about to be used so they can create a safe distance between themselves and the target. Here, neither officer announced they would be deploying the taser to one another nor to the complainant. In fact, neither officer had much communication at all to convey their perception of the complainant's potential threat or options to de-escalate, with the exception of Officer 1 telling Officer 2 to holster her pistol on the onset. Based on their lack of relevant disciplinary history, I recommend Officer 1 receive a 1-day suspension and training specifically related to de-escalation and less lethal uses of force, including the taser policy, for the Category D1 offense. For Officer 2's Category A, excessive use of force, and 2 Category D offenses, I recommend a cumulative 20-day suspension and training specifically related to de-escalation and less lethal uses of force, including the taser policy. And I think, was that correct? I think I added. Yeah, and I'm sorry, I didn't add my, I had actually, we didn't put this in the PRR, but we also, when I looked over it after I'd have submitted it, there was a, Officer 2 also getting a 1-day suspension, just as Officer 1 for the de-escalation and least lethal uses of force for the taser policy violation, which was a D1 offense, or first offense. And that concludes that.
Thank you, Director.
Any questions?
Any questions? Mr. Abdullah.
My question is, do we know if there has already been any type of discipline done through the police department? And if so, would that hinder any discipline that happens here today?
So so I attended the use of force hearing on this particular case, and at that point, from my understanding, I was there. There wasn't any discipline. The police department said that she was within policy. I abstained from a vote at that particular hearing. So as far as my understanding, there has not been any discipline for either officer.
To piggyback on that, is being exonerated?
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, being exonerated.
Does that mean that we cannot then recommend any more discipline if she has been exonerated, or if Officer 2 has been exonerated by an OPA investigation?
That would go back to the same thing that we've been running into. I think that she's already went through the process already. And according to what Metro Legal said, was that unless this is something new, then yes, I don't think that, and you can probably talk more about that, Attorney Yoon.
I don't think the force review process is the same as an OPA review for an allegation. So I think that they're doing a different process. They're involving different people. They're actually, the deputy chiefs are involved with it, including Director Pitcher, which is why she's abstaining. And so I don't think that you sustaining allegations would fall within a deconfliction process that the Force Review Board does. So I don't think that there's anything in the Metro legal memo that would prevent you all from sustaining these allegations and recommending discipline.
Mr. Holloway.
From your investigation, and this is what you concluded to be your finding, right? This is the conclusion. This is y'all finding what you found from the investigation, right? So the only thing that I could say you probably do is just go ahead and submit what your finding were. Then it's up to the police department if they want to hold that liability on their own, because there were some mistakes that was made. And when you get in court with a lawsuit, it's going to show where some of the policy was violated. And in order for the police department to keep that off their back, is they go ahead and make some kind of recommendation for their violation. But if they're going to exonerate them and say they was justified, then they could lose in the end on this.
Thank you, Mr. Holloway. Mr. Kamlaguch, then Mr. Goddard, then Mr. Abdullah.
My question is different from, I think, the conversation that's happening right now, so can I just go later?
Mr. Goddard.
Yes. The list of documents that were reviewed by staff and Executive Director Fitchard includes an OPA report. Can you and I got sort of 2 points there. One, can you tell us what the OPA report concluded? If they concluded there wasn't a problem, what their basis for that was, and then to Mr. Yoon, I think we may be through the OPO process if they've had a meeting and report, but I don't know for sure. Sorry, go ahead. And if I misunderstood that reference to the OPA report, I apologize, but it
Well,
looked to me like there had
an
been a
OPA
report.
report in here. I'm looking to see, I don't recall what it said, and I'm looking through the investigative report to see if they mention it in here. But in the report, it's the same incident, and they did exonerate the officers. So there, I do recall seeing the report, but I don't think it's mentioned in the investigative report. Hold on 1 second. He can pull it up, though. He's looking to see if he can pull it up now.
Should we move on to Mr. Kamaguchi's question?
I'm sorry.
Should we move on to Mr. Kamaguchi's question while we find it? Or?
Are you looking it up in, okay, yeah, so they're looking it up. And if you had let me ask him, did you have a specific question about it? Because I do recall looking at all the interviews and reading the report, so.
Just whether there was any basis in their report for concluding there was no violation. It just, basically, he's fairly straightforward where they had something different there was all.
I don't recall that.
Okay.
But I will, we can go on to his question, and then when he pulls it up in the OP, he's pulling up the file now.
Sorry, I lost my number. I was trying to find it real fast. Here it is. I think there is, and ironically, it is about the a quote that's from the OPA, from the interview with the OPA investigator. It's number 22. If you could just speak more to this quote. In that situation, in that moment, the complainant was like a monster to me. And that's just the first sentence. So if you could just speak more on just giving us more context on that and what you think was going on at that moment.
Well, the officer at the time, when she's interviewed by the OPA investigator, she's trying to describe, like, they were asking her specific questions on how, what happened and, what her experience was. And, they interview her and ask her what her reasoning for using her service weapon was. And that's her quote. I mean, she's saying that she was really frightened and she was really scared. And that the complainant was really big, and she said she, reminded her of a monster, and she was very scared because she's small. She's small in stature. She's like 5'3", and she's small. And she said that he was, I'm assuming he's like over 6 feet tall, and so and it's dark outside, and so and she was concerned for her. She said that she was concerned because her partner, and, he's laying on the ground on his back and using his feet to kind of kick, at the complainant, who the complainant is, like standing, and he's tripped on gravel. He's laying on his back is how he described it, and his feet are up, and he's extending his feet out to keep the complainant away from him. And she is actually behind him. She's a little away, and she is standing behind the complainant. And then the complainant turns and she says, begins to move towards her.
Yeah. I guess like as I'm reading this, it was I think body worn camera footage would have been perfect here because I think it's a couple things that I'm having a difficult time of imagining. One, I think it's perfect when you explain it that these two officers are on opposite ends of each other. If I'm understanding that correctly, one officer is behind the complainant, the other one is in front.
So she's behind the complainant.
Right. And officer one is in front of the complainant.
And the officer one is on the ground.
Got you.
In front of the complainant.
Got you.
On his back.
Okay. And so I guess the other thing that is difficult to understand is, did these two officers arrive at the scene together?
Yes, as far as I remember, yes, they arrived together.
So is there any way, how do they end up in this position?
So they end up in this position because, so they're in front of a house, the house that the complainant lives in. His wife is, there's been this domestic violence call. He apparently takes off in the car. They stop him. So they're not directly in front of the house. They're a little bit up the street because he comes back towards where the house is. They're a little bit above the street. There's a child there, too. And they end up in this position because the complainant begins to walk away, and they're trying to talk to him about what's happening. And I think it's in here.
It is.
Yeah, it's in there.
It is.
And they, well, he says that, but at some point, I think what happens is when Officer One slips and falls on the gravel, which is a little bit above where the house is, based on the photos, and the complainant is angry because the officers are there. I think that's where the escalation begins, and he is tased. The taser does not take effect, and so I just believe that at that point, that's where everything gets kind of like, worked up.
Thank you for that. And for this, I just have two more inquiries. One, so the complainant is walking. The complainant is walking?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear on that. And then my other, well, this is really a statement. It's not an inquiry. I think it's like extremely alarming to see, these type of things where somebody is like dehumanized in a moment of like clear frustration on everyone's part. So I just wanted to hold that there. I also think it's quite alarming to see the differences in between like where we are and where our investigators and our staff have come to as a recommendation and where OPA is, which I think is also indicative of why this board was created in the first place. So I just wanted to hold those two things, but thank you for answering those questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kamlaguch. Mr. Abdullah.
So I basically want to kind of piggyback off of what Jamel was saying. And I know Mr. Yoon said there would be no problem, as far as the OPA is concerned. But it feels like, and it's just me, it feels like this is a way to kind of cut the ability to do anything. If you look at the fact that the OPA made a decision, because, and correct me if I'm wrong, my memory serves me, but when we find ourselves in this position once before, there was nothing that could be done about it. And so now we're in the same position where a decision has been already made, and if we give our decision, then what will be done about it? So I think that we need to really look at and figure out what can we do in a situation like this.
And I think I tried to bring that up with the chief in my previous letter to him, but we do have to realize that this case is from 2020, so it has taken us this long. It has taken this long for it to actually get to us. So they did their investigation and closed it within what may have been a reasonable amount of time because they had access to everything that we didn't, right? Mr. Nguyen and then Judge Brown.
So, if you don't mind, I hate to do this analysis. I mean, you've had a lot of time to work on this case, obviously, and it's probably not fair to you for us to try to sit here and analyze your analysis of it. But you're saying the OPA ruled there was no fault, basically. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they exonerated.
Okay. And you were in the review with the chief on this shooting, is that right?
I was at the force review hearing. The chief is not there, but the deputy chiefs are there.
Did the officers testify?
They did. Well, one, Officer Flores testified. The other officer did not.
The officer that fired the firearm testified?
Yes.
And she said that the reason, that's female, I guess, is it a female officer? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They fired their weapon because they feared for the safety of the officer lying on his back after the defendant or the complainant had been tased and pulled the taser out of his body and continued to move towards the officer lying on his back, and that's when she fired her weapon?
Yes, so that's correct. The officer that's laying on the ground, Officer 1, also used his taser, and it did not work. And this is, let's just talk about that. Like, the issue is the tasers were expired, right? And so the bigger issue, which was that there is a policy, and that's what you see this violation is based on, is that the officers did not check the expiration date on their tasers. And so I think that's one of the issues here, that the tasers were ineffective. As close as they were to the complainant, the tasers should have been able to do some type of de-escalation, if you want to say the tasers use de-escalation. So neither tasers work. And so what the officer says, Officer 2, the one that fired her service weapon, is that the complainant, takes those wires and at some point begins to try to wrap them around the feet of Officer 1. Officer 1 says something slightly different about, like, he's using his feet to push the complainant back, but he also has, put his taser away because the complainant's not armed. And he doesn't feel, based on his own testimony, like this is that kind of threat where, he needed to use a taser again because it wasn't effective. And so at the same time that he's putting his taser away, the complainant is shot. He hears a gunshot. And Officer 2 fires her service weapon when she says that the complainant is, facing her and walking towards her. So it seems like all of this happened, of course, really quickly. Officer 1 did not testify at the use of force hearing, which I was waiting to hear from him, but they didn't let him testify. The only testimony was from Officer 2, who said that she was very frightened and that she, shot the complainant because she was concerned about her partner being injured. And she also said that she shot downward because she did not want to use what she considered the kind of force that could have killed him in front of his family.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's what she said at the hearing.
That's an interesting statement for an officer to make about using that kind of force. But she saw it as her only option. Is that what you got from their statement?
That's what I got from there, yes.
Yeah, and I know you know this, the domestic violence calls are the most dangerous calls police respond to ever. The first officer killed in this city was killed on a domestic in 1875. So there's a long history of Metro officers being killed by domestic violence offenders. That's on the mind of every officer responding to these kind of calls, I'm sure. If the OPA and the chief's office both looked at this case and heard her say that she feared for the life of her fellow officer on his back, who was armed and, subject to being overcome by this guy, this person, it might seem reasonable for her to use that kind of force. And her honest statement was that's the only thing she had to stop him, to prevent him from attacking the officer. So I'm ready to judge these officers when they make mistakes, but in this kind of circumstance, this was a dynamic situation that had gone out of control, it sounds like to me. And in those seconds, she had to make a decision, which are not easy to make. She used a type of force that stopped him. Thank God he wasn't killed. And I'm sure she felt the same way. So as I'm sitting here trying to understand why OPA and the chief's office ruled that he was not at fault, it makes sense to me why he wasn't at fault in this case, or she wasn't at fault in this case.
Judge Brown and then Mr. Holloway. Your microphone, Judge Brown.
Thank you. When I read the report, the thing that kind of struck me was the comment that the officers, according to the complaint, approached with weapons drawn. And I agree with member that domestic calls of this type are the most dangerous. And I don't think there's any question about that, but there's indication there were witnesses to this other than the police officer. I mean, the individual said he was trying to ask the officers to holster their weapons and such. So, again, that's a judgment call, but, and the question is, do the officers simply have their weapon down at their side or they're pointing? To me, makes a difference. If they come up to the scene and point the weapons immediately, that's certainly not going to de-escalate something. But were there any, you mentioned that there were interview of witnesses. Did the witnesses comment on how the thing started or how the complainant was acting? The police officers say he was shouting and somewhat irrational. What did the witnesses say?
So the witness that we interviewed would have been the victim of this case, and hold on one second. So the victim said that she and her husband had been arguing all day. And she said they decided to go outside, drive around the block so the kids would not be in the middle of it. She said that she had a particular medical problem that caused her to be off balance, and that she slipped down the steps. And so there was this discrepancy between what the police were initially, what they thought, and what she had to say about what happened in regards to that, and why the police were even at her house. She said that her husband was, at the time, he was very angry, and then, and she wasn't really close in where she could really view what was happening because it was dark and how the street looks. And when you see the pictures, it is really dark. And so she's not able, I think, in my opinion, based on what I saw from her interview, she's not able to see everything that's happening between the officers and her husband at that time. So, her view is, kind of far away, and then there's a vehicle in between them, and so I don't think that she's able to actually capture what was really happening between the three that were there. She said that she went to the police precinct, and she kind of gives her statement to them as well. I hope I answered your question. I mean, I'm trying to not get into every single detail, and even though I know how important this case is, I also have to be careful about the things that I'm saying that could be in this report that are confidential. And so I am trying I'm trying to answer your questions into my fullest capacity without going overboard in the sense that we have to protect this stuff. And, you know, I can only answer so much in not in totality, really, to be honest.
And that leads us back to our other problem of, if we want to see the full skinny on it, we have to come down there, and I've been down twice, and I mean, it's an ordeal to get there, but it seems to me that I've done a lot of confidential work with the Army and courts and everything else, but that if it's available, and when I'm down there, you bring it up on your confidential computer, but that it seems to me there ought to be some way that the board members could have secure passwords where they can log into it. Of course, it'll be recorded who's looking at it, but I just hate having to rule on these things when I don't have the full picture. And I think that's a critical thing that we need to be able to get some sort of access, because trying to come down there and review these things, because generally we get them maybe a week before, but that means sometime during that week we've got to get all the way down there and to review them. And if you try to review 3 of those things in full, it's just not easy to do. So that's my concern. And as I say, I was concerned why the officers had their weapons out, and I was just curious whether it was a situation where they sort of had the weapons unclipped or at their side, or whether they were pointing at them. Starting out with the weapons pointed most of the time is not the way to keep something from escalating.
So I think the points of this case that are important are several. Number one, Officer 1 is on the ground, and the complainant is talking. They're having some type of verbal whatever, right? Discussion, altercation, whatever. It's verbal. He is saying, in the report I tell you, he says, go less lethal. He says that to Officer number 2. So I took that into consideration. He's telling her, go less lethal, at the same time that she's, firing a shot or is attempting to do that. So there is this communication problem between the two of them. There isn't any call that a taser is being used, right, initially, from the onset. And then the third thing is, the reason why this ended up in that situation is because of the expired taser. The taser is not effective. So I can't determine whether or not this officer feared for her life or not. But what I can say is that policy was violated in those things. And so that's what I based it on. Was this use of force necessary and reasonable in regards to the policy? And what I find is that it was not. If your partner is using less lethal and tells you to use less lethal, and then you use your service weapon when the person isn't even not in close proximity to you, I find that to be not a justifiable way to use lethal use of force. And so that's why I made that decision.
I follow that, and of course, one of these things is, should you have minimum sizes for officers so you don't get a small officer against a very large complainant? And I think that train has left the station a long time ago. Yeah, we're not going to see size limits, but I don't disagree with the conclusion. I think that that it was unnecessary to fire the shot, and there is a serious problem. I mean, why do we have the requirement to check the tasers if they're not being checked? And it's pretty obvious. You look at the date on the expiration date; it either is expired or it hadn't. And as I understand the policy, it's to check them daily, and so that could well have stopped it if either of those tasers had been effective. But apparently, both of them were out, and that does not show a careful following of policy to have the tasers there, because that's the whole idea of a taser, is to be less lethal. And if it doesn't work, all you've done is you've aggravated the suspect, and now you're down to firearm.
And I will say that after the investigator discovered that the taser was expired, he did notify the police department, and they apparently made some adjustments. And of course, if you've been following what's happening, they have requested new tasers, and I'm in support of that. I think what they have was outdated, and having new tasers, they have the new taser that they have ordered is going to be more effective. It's been redesigned, so it's a little less sensitive. It's more sensitive, I think, now than it was. And so, whether or not you believe that a taser is a de-escalation tool or not, we still need to, it is known to have effects that are, of course, it's less lethal than using a firearm.
Mr. Holloway.
They teach you in training, you take care of your equipment, it'll take care of you. And he told her de-escalate, and nobody had never mentioned this. She could have taken her mace and put it right in his eyeball, and he definitely would have got up then. But never thought about it. You got to be creative. You can't be scary. If you're scary, you don't need the job.
Mr. Goddard.
Quick question for Executive Director, and then I got a comment. The report findings of fact state that Officer 2 did not test her taser. It doesn't say anything about Officer 1. Did you find that Officer 1 did not test his also, or was that undetermined?
Apparently, he tested his violation is that he didn't announce that he intended to use his taser.
Okay, thank you, that's very helpful. Here's my comment then. The use of force policy statement on that is whenever possible, the verbal warning of taser to alert other personnel, they're supposed to give the verbal warning of taser to alert other personnel that the taser is about to be used so they can create a safe distance between themselves and the target. Mm-hmm. So the purpose isn't, that is the purpose rather. I think, my opinion, we've got an opinion, I think Officer 1 took a lot of actions that were de-escalating and were designed to avoid this type of result. And I'm okay with not finding a violation by him. If we do find a violation, I would sure like the report to note that while he did take some others, he didn't do this one thing, and there's a citation for that. But I don't think we can find him. All that's there is that he didn't yell taser, as I understand. Is that right?
That's it.
Mr. Abdullah.
Yeah, I'm interested to know, and because I don't know if I'm hearing two things. When she shot him, was he walking towards her, or was he still dealing with her partner?
No, she said that he had turned around and was walking towards her.
Mr. Campbell-Gooch.
Yeah, I have a motion to accept as is and send to the chief.
Is there a second to that? Thank you, Dr. Hildreth. The motion to accept as is. There was already a second. Any focused discussion on that? Mr. Campbell-Gooch.
Never mind.
If there's no further discussion on that, all in favor? Oh.
I'm sorry, maybe I missed something. You made a motion to adopt the proposal? Was there a second? That's what I did. Yes. Oh, okay. So now we're up to this discussion of vote. Okay.
Correct.
I'm sorry, I just, my hearing is not really good.
Sure. So we'll do a roll call vote here. Since there's no further discussion, Mr. Holloway,
I accept.
Mr. Nguyen,
No.
Ms. McCree, Mr. Witzel, Mr. Goddard,
No, but based on what's recommended for Officer 1.
Dr. Hildreth.
Aye.
I vote aye. Mr. Campbell-Gooch,
Aye.
Mr. Hayes,
Aye.
Judge Brown,
Aye.
Mr. Abdullah.
Aye.
The motion passes. Now we can move on to complaint D 2020-003.
Excuse me. I gotta take this off. D 2020-003 is a director-initiated audit of an officer-involved shooting death of Mr. William Johnson on May 21st, 2020. On that date at approximately 9:08 p.m., an off-duty police officer, Daryl Osmond, called emergency call center and told the ECC staff that he had been shot at twice on Pine Valley Road in Davidson County while in plain clothes, with one of the bullets striking him in the shoulder. Mr. Osmond initially reported that the person who shot him was a male, white, 5'10" to 5'11" in height, medium to slender build, wearing a mask, and that the person drove away in a gray Ford Flex vehicle. 2 9mm bullet casings were recovered on the scene. At 9:17 p.m., Officer 1 observed a gray Ford Flex pass him on Ashland City Highway. Officer 1 activated his emergency equipment to stop the vehicle. The car did not stop, and a pursuit was initiated, involving other officers, including a helicopter. 4 shots were reportedly heard coming from the vehicle while it was being pursued. One of those while in an area where multiple construction workers were present. 4 9mm bullet casings were later found inside the gray Ford Flex by the TBI investigators. 2 spike strips were deployed in an attempt to stop the vehicle, with the second one being successful at puncturing the tires, bringing the car to stop on I-440 near Dickerson Pike. Only one occupant was observed getting out the driver's side door. And just to make a correction, this was not near Dickerson Pike. This was near Nolensville, or I guess it's. But it's not, it's in the other direction, going back towards the Antioch direction. It is not near, it's not on Dickerson Pike, so I'm sorry I said that. Only one occupant was observed getting out of the driver's side door of the car, and the officers on the scene report that the driver of the vehicle, later identified as Mr. William Johnson Jr., pointed a gun at them and fired 2 shots. DNA swabs from the 9mm Smith & Wesson pistol and the magazine recovered near Mr. Johnson Jr.'s person matched his profile. Gunpowder primer residue was found on Mr. Johnson Jr.'s person and inside the gray Ford Flex he was driving. 3 Mmpd officers returned fire. A medical examiner reported Mr. Johnson Jr. was struck 6 times, and the medical report concluded Mr. Johnson Jr.'s cause of death was multiple gunshot wounds. On April 6, 2021, after reviewing the TBI's investigation, the DA's office reported that the grand jury had chosen not to issue a presentment, meaning no criminal charges would be filed. A forced review of the police officers by the MPD determined that all 3 officers acted within policy in firing their weapons. Before I state the conclusions of the report, I want to take an opportunity to reiterate what I feel the MNCO's role is during an audit like this one. I believe people can sometimes misconstrue the role of the community oversight with that of judge and jury. They think our job is to point fingers and find someone to blame. It's either this person's fault or the other person's fault, and the misperception is that it is my job to find out who is good and who is bad. I want to clarify that that is not my goal. In this audit, my role as the executive director of the MNCO was to review the agencies and criminal justice actors who were involved and those who investigated the incident, interviewed the officers, and determined whether their actions were within policy or out of policy. It was to decide whether these institutions and processes had any deficiencies in their investigation and conclusions, and if there were any, to point that out and to make recommendations. I reviewed the TBI's interviews of 28 officers, the reports, the forensic analysis. I reviewed the district attorney and Mmpd's actions. And from the evidence reviewed, I concluded that there were no deficiencies in their investigation and findings, and that the officers' use of force in this matter were within policy based on the preponderance of evidence that was presented. I want to make clear that in no uncertain times, just because we find that the police officers in this matter acted within policy, it should not be misinterpreted in any way that we are making a finding against Mr. Johnson. I want to note that in the immediate aftermath of Mr. Johnson's death, it is too often the case that a person's criminal history and their mental health are brought into question, rather than the individual circumstances that led to the death of Mr. Johnson. And I also want to highlight that Mr. Johnson has a family and loved ones who are still valued members of the Nashville community. And I want to state that our findings and conclusions in this audit of what the Mmpd did and did not do, that does not dispute any of that. And I conclude that.
Thank you, Director Fitchard. Any questions regarding this case? Judge Brown? There's a motion to adopt the proposed resolution report.
I second.
There's a second. Any focused discussion? If there's none, all in favor of approving the proposed resolution report, say aye. Any opposed? The report passes.
All right. The next case is D 2021-039. It's a community member initiated complaint where the complainant alleged that on July 5th, 2021, multiple Mmpd officers entered his home without knocking and without permission, obstructing his rights, and were discourteous and harassing. They came by repeatedly to his home and knocked on his door without a valid purpose. The MNCO initiated an investigation into the actions of 3 police officers. On July 4, 2021, the complainant acknowledges that he had an overnight guest in the very early morning of July 5, 2021 at approximately 2:46 a.m. That guest called 911, alleging that the complainant had strangled her and threatened her with violence if she tried to leave. Officers arrived on the scene at approximately 3:05 a.m. to investigate and respond to the 911 call. Upon arrival, they met with the individual who called 911. They observed injuries. She had a large gash to her head. Also around her neck, she had some bruising. Her voice was hoarse, and she told the officers on the scene that she had been strangled to the point of unconsciousness. Officers escorted her to an ambulance where she is taken to the hospital to receive staples and then go to the complainant's door to interview and arrest him. The door is ajar, and from the open door, the officers say they could see the complainant laying down. Officer 1 pushes the door open further and announces Metro Police, to which Officer 1 states the complainant pretended to be asleep. But after rolling over, the officer instructs him to stand up and put his arms around his back, to which the complainant was compliant. During their interviews with the MNCO investigator, all officers deny having any contact with the complainant except seeing him at court appearances for the ongoing criminal charges, but not having any communications with him during those times. Officer 3 reports that the complainant did have a warrant out for his arrest post this incident, which may account for why police were knocking on his door on other occasions, but Officer 3 did not himself have any further contact with the complainant. Based on the evidence provided, I concluded the officers did have a valid purpose for opening his door that night, and for the future officers to have knocked on his door because he had a warrant. I also noted that reviewing the body camera footage, the officers helped the complainant with his shoes and socks after handcuffing him, and after bringing the complainant to the patrol car, they went back inside the complainant's residence to retrieve a long-sleeve article of clothing at the complainant's request. And so I concluded that, my conclusion is that the executive director finds by preponderance of evidence presented that all allegations of obstruction of rights, discourtesy, and conduct unbecoming against all three officers are unfounded. And that concludes that.
Thank you, Director Fitchard. Any questions on this proposed resolution report? Judge Brown?
Well, I guess this shows the use of body cameras. It would have been nice to have it in that first case, but it appears that, to me, the director's findings are supported by the evidence and particularly by body cameras, and I move its adoption.
Sorry, was that a motion to approve as is? Yes. Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you, Ms. McCree. Any focused discussion? If there is none, all in favor of adopting the proposed resolution report as is, say aye. Any opposed? The report passes. All right. The next part of the agenda is public comment. Not sure if we had anyone signed up today. Okay. Then, if there is none, any new business or announcements? Mr. Goddard?
It's just a comment and a question. 3 PRRs a month is not going to get us caught up. What is the plan for next month? Can we have more next month? Do we need a second meeting? And
Yeah, I think we have a few that we're working through. I think that they're ready. We were thinking about having a special call meeting next month. The problem with that is I don't know if we're going to have enough board members because the selection process it isn't until, I think it's the 15th. And so, I mean, we could squeeze in an extra meeting, but what we're doing in regards to the PRs with our team is, like I mentioned earlier in the agent report, is instead of working on the latter part of 2021, where I'm going to move that investigator to start working on those director initiated cases, and so I want them to focus on those use of force cases so that we can knock those out. I think we still have 13 maybe, I think now, since we did a few. And if we can get those cases that are the early part of 2021, because we're done with 2020 now. So we are at least in 2021, albeit not where we want to be. I think that's the plan. The plan is to sit down with them on Monday and try to figure out a way that they can, instead of the cases that they keep, working on, a few hours here, a few hours there, that we can spend that time on the cases that have that, of course, those outrageous numbers for 300 days, or 261 days. So hopefully we can combine that, and if we can have a special meeting next month and have 5 or 6, and then have 2 or 3 at our regular meeting, that would be great. I just don't know if that's going to happen if, in fact, we are, we're going to be, are we going to have enough people to be at a special call meeting? We would need to have, 6 people? 7? How many people we have to have? 7? So if we can get 7 board members at a meeting to do the special call meeting, even though we're going to be possibly out of 3, and I don't really know how that works. If in fact we had a special call meeting, would the board members that are currently supposed to roll off on January the 31st, could we ask them to be, they have 60 days, would they be able to participate?
I think yes. Yes.
Okay. So yes, that would, and so Attorney Young's been working really hard on the cases and trying to get those completed. I mean, without having, when Assistant Director Clausey was here, he was, helping that, and that gave us 4 investigators. And so we're now down to 3. I have asked to help some. I've tried to help. I've helped a little bit with them, looking over some of the stuff, trying to get it, through. But without having some of the other positions filled, I just don't think that I'm at the capacity to be able to take on an investigation, which, yeah, we talked about that. But to answer your question, 3 is not going to get us through it. But we hope to have a couple special call meetings to push this forward. I know I started rattling on because I'm trying to process it through my head, but because, of course, I want to get through these too. I want us to, hopefully by June, not to have any 2021 cases. That's my goal. And how to get there is that we're going to have to be super creative when we only have 3 investigators. And I definitely don't want to overwhelm them where they have to, this is a lot of work, and it's a lot of, when you start looking at the cases that we have with the use of force, we had 10 shootings. For someone to have to watch those videos over and over and over again, I have to take that into account too, that sometimes they just need a mental health day and they have to have some time away. So, our goal is to get them done in 6 months.
Mr. Holloway, and then...
If you look at your bylaw, it will state that, if we don't have enough people in place by the end of January, the one that's supposed to be rolling off can continue to work till you get them replaced. So hopefully that the vacancy that we have will be filled by February the 15th, and we can continue to move forward. But look at your bylaw and see what it said, but we still could work there until you get somebody.
Mr. Nguyen, do you have a question?
No, I just had a comment. Thank you, Jack. I just had a quick comment. The technology expert at IECP, that it would be available if you all want to do a Zoom with him. I explained to him who was interested in knowing what they know at IECP about the technology and the controversies about it, especially the civil liberties controversies. Because everything he sent me was a bit dated. If you look at the dates on that, they're not recent reports. They're a few years old. And I asked him about that, and he said the controversies over civil liberties had been discussed years ago with police departments like San Antonio, who've had them for 15 years or more. But I told him that the Oversight Board was interested in understanding what their view was on their acknowledgement that there's a civil liberties concern, especially with communities that have been over-policed in the past. So I explained that if he did come to speak to us, he was going to get hard questions from us because we represent the community. And the other thing, too, I just want to say this for the rest of the board. That vote that we made on the acceptance of the license plate readers was the hardest vote that I've had to make since I've been on this board. Simple reason that, Dr. Hildreth, your comments about what you said, how it impacted you, it's still ringing in my ears today. And it wasn't easy for me to vote against the license plate readers because of the impacts on African Americans in this community, and especially your words. So my vote against it was not an easy thing to do, but the board spoke and the message was clear to the city council. But the other thing too is, and I hope Chief Drake hears this from this board, that if they ever decide to deploy license plate readers, that you, the director, and this board play a big part in designing policies, overwatch, data review, every piece of it. And I think if that happens, then any controversies that are questions that we have as a board about civil liberties of anybody in this city could be answered by this board. It's overwatch of this program that's controversial to the people who ask us to come here and the taxpayers who pay the police department every day. So I hope that if that happens, Director, that they've got you on speed dial and say, we want you in a meeting around everything around license plate readers. Could I ask you your feeling on that, or has that happened yet?
No, it hasn't happened, but I'm in total agreement of that. I mean, of course, when we think about the council members' her license plate reader bill that's moving forward, it doesn't have the oversight in it that it should. And so and if it moves forward and it passes, then the only way that we're going to get that ability to be able to do auditing of license plate readers and to have that oversight component built in is through policy by the police department.
Right.
So yes, I think that our team is willing to do that, and that's why I want to continue to move forward with this particular hire that would be able to do that type of work for our department.
Well, I certainly hope, if Chief Drake hears this, that accountability to the community means making sure the community understands that whatever they do is not oppressive to that community. And the smart thing to do would have community input with any kind of policy that has this kind of impact. So I hope that he understands that, and let's hope that he invites you and this committee to be part of that decisions on something that this controversial, enough that we'd get a no vote, that we didn't even want the license plate readers. That should be a signal to the police department that this is hypersensitive and it needs to be dealt with that way. So thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Hildreth.
Thank you. I'd like to go back to the proposed resolution reports, and I did want to emphasize, Member Goddard, that at the last meeting on December 20th, this board did vote to be available for 2 meetings this month. And so I guess a clarification I want to ask is, did we not do that because of the resource crunch that you mentioned? There weren't enough cases to bring to us for 2 meetings? Would that be, am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah, we only had 2 that was like really ready. And then Attorney Yoon worked really hard, and because, of course, we had a resignation, he worked really hard pretty much by himself. He was really flying solo dolo on that. We did not have an opportunity to present that on there. And then there were some conflicts with, one of the things that we have to take into consideration is other people utilize this space. And so trying to get the MNN team together and all that, sometimes those dates are booked up. And so it's not as flexible as I would like. And so trying to get everyone on board and to get a date with enough time to notify the MNN team where, they can come is challenging. And so we have to take that in consideration as we're talking about having more than 1 meeting, and especially in a short turnaround time. And he's actually doing this work, I would say, pretty much by himself. And then trying to get in front of some of it and trying to assist the investigators with all the questions too. So that's why we didn't have it.
Thank you. I think that's very helpful to have a detailed explanation, because the community is holding us accountable as well. So when we make a motion to say we do something and then we don't do it, if people are actually following this like a soap opera, it's like, hey, you already said you were going to. So understanding, I think, kind of goes back to the budget discussion, doesn't it? When we're looking for justifications, when you have a citizen board that is ready to move forward and it can't move forward because there are constrictions in your pipeline, that's another way that we help talk about why. And remember when I wrote it down, but it was on another piece of paper, when you were talking about risk avoidance or cost avoidance, whatever that is, that thing, what he said, right? Penny wise and pound foolish. So very much need to have whatever you need so we can do the work that we did. My last comment, just trial balloon, I wanted to put out here is, what would it look like maybe when we do have a meeting with several PRRs, whether it's our standing meeting or a special meeting? Could we get this room an hour in advance? Would it be possible for your staff to bring the full file? And could board members have open file discovery up here before we get started? I mean, that would be one way to handle the access issue, right? Because we'll already be here. Maybe there's not as much time to deliberate, but it's better than nothing. So I wanted to ask about that possibility. I'm not necessarily inviting debate on that right now, but just something that we could think about and work on so that we can be as fully informed as possible. Thank you.
Okay, I'll have Attorney Yoon check on that, because of course we want to just make certain that, because we would have to publicly notice that maybe. I'm not sure how that works.
So even if we publicly notice that we're going to be here, we wouldn't be talking. I mean, they can watch us, see us doing this, but I envision it, or even so not be, okay, I'm thinking out loud on the record. Haven't done that in a long time, okay, wherever two or more of us are talking, that's a problem. So if we are here and we can kind of sign up for a time in the corner with you, one-on-one or one on staff to look at it, then we are not doing the member-to-member conversation.
Right, okay. Because we don't have any paper files. Everything's electronic. That's why, when I was thinking about that, I was thinking like,
No,
we can't do that.
So over here in the corner where we just like hunker down and maybe with VR goggles or something. Thank you.
Mr. Campbell-Gooch.
I remember when these conversations and these board members were nothing but thinking out loud. And with that being said, I just wanted to address the board and just tell folks how much of a pleasure it has been to be able to serve in this capacity and in this platform, because we never know what's going to happen. January 22nd, when I was put on this board, I never thought that we would be at the place that we are now. I remember those first initial board meetings where we were 4 or 5 hours trying to figure out how to best put this together, what are best practices, how can we make this board something legitimate that outlives all of us, and that is a place where the community can feel comfortable, they can feel heard, and they can feel like it's a group of folks out here really representing their interest and sensitive to their experience when it comes to the police department and anything that they may experience and any harm that they experience. Most of you know, like, I've experienced so many things as a board member here. And as a community member that was placed here from 37208, and my experience with police have been very intimate, to say the least. Folks know I've been doxxed. People have called and said wild things about me personally. I've received all type of hate mail, emails, all of it, if you name it. I've experienced it from people walking up to me in grocery stores. And it has been an interesting experience. But with all of that, I would still choose to do this again, because to serve the folks of my community in this capacity is a luxury and something that I embrace fully. And I just want to thank, like, everyone that I've been able to work in this board in this capacity with, and really look forward to the future of whatever doing this justice work will look like. And if I'm never able to occupy this seat again, I just want to say once again, thank you to everyone, whether they're listening, watching, and I want to say, you don't need any prerequisites to do this work. You just need to have a heart and a sensitivity for the needs of the people who experience the harshest form of harm that our system does to our people. So I just want to say again, thank you for everyone here. I love this, and I'm really looking forward to see where this board goes in the future and how we can help Nashville become a better place and welcome for everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell-Gooch. Mr. Hayes.
I have 2 items. After that passionate address from Member Campbell-Gooch, I think it's very appropriate to clap for the members that are here. Excellent work. Okay, now back to business. Since we were talking about license plate readers, I went back and looked at the summary, and I do want to just highlight this, that the bill that's going to be going to third reading, it says DA and public defender, but not the COB, can audit any LPR system. And
if that bill passes, I know we've already written a letter to council. Okay, thank you. I'm really for making some type of statement saying that if this bill passes, the COB does need to be a part of it, of the audit.
Mr. Martinez, that'd be your last word for this.
The request is to write a letter to council?
Yes, saying that the COB needs to be a part of the audit along with the DA and the public defender. Because that was in the bill, 841, that was in the bill. But it's not in the bill, 961.
Mr. Campbell-Gooch?
And I'm just asking, can they amend the bill on the third reading?
Not sure.
They can't amend the bill on third reading.
The bill's not amendable on third reading. And there were several amendments put on before second reading. But there was discussion at the council meeting that it would not be amendable upon third.
And so with that being said, Rosenberg's bill is deferred, right?
Correct, is indefinitely deferred.
But there's a rule in city council, whichever bill passes last is the bill that is going into effect, right? And the reason why I'm saying that is because there was conversation at the last LPR subcommittee meeting if they were to bring Rosenberg bill back. If Rosenberg bills pass after Johnston bill, then Rosenberg bill negates Johnston's, from what I understand from council rules. So that's just something to hold here because Johnston's bill is unamendable. But if Rosenberg's bill goes through at a later date, then all of his language about oversight would go directly into play, if I'm reading that correctly.
That's correct. The bill can be brought back. It would be brought back on second reading, and then by procedure would be deferred one meeting. So there is then that bill would have the chance to be amended prior to moving in the process.
So I think a good middle ground here, Board Member Hayes, is that if we write a letter saying to hold off on passing Courtney's bill on third reading so that Rosenberg's bill has an opportunity to be worked on, I think that's a good middle ground. I do want to hold and say, though, we have talked to people, and they have been like, we do not want these, right? Because although the data around license plate readers, as we've seen, is very contestable, we do know a lot about Mmpd, which is what I hear often. So I do want to hold that too. I just wanted to mention that.
Mr. Hayes, are you?
I was just going to say that option is acceptable to me. Because again, I just strongly feel that the COB needs to be a part of the audit. So however we can make that happen as a board.
Director Fitchard.
I just want to, is everyone finished with the license plate reader? Who was it? Oh, Mr. Holloway, go ahead.
Mr. Holloway.
One thing we can do after sending them a letter, if 10 of us be at the meeting and they ask if anyone want to speak against it, we can say, we are from the Oversight Board, and we would like for the Oversight Board to have a decision in making the policy for the license plate reading.
Judge Brown.
I fully agree that the COB should be part of any audits. I would, though, like Member Wynn's suggestion that there is the police official that has maybe a little bit more view. I was frankly concerned, and one of the reasons I voted against us getting into it was I thought the presentations we had were kind of one-sided. I'd really like to make sure I hear the other side, but I fully agree that the board should be part of any audits of a license plate reader, apart from whether we should have it or not. But if we have it, we should be able to we should have a seat at the table.
Trying to figure out what my task is here. Mr. Campbell-Gooch.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if that was a lot. I think Chair, board members, I think since we have a diverse set of opinions, I think what it feels like what we all can agree on right here is that Courtney Johnson's bill shouldn't go through on third reading. Whether it is that we are just against license plate readers or that it doesn't list the Community Oversight Board as a auditing function. So I think, Chair, I think the letter, and I'm a terrible writer, could read something like this. Previously, we have written you to tell you that we have taken an official against that we are against license plate readers. And we also know that if Johnson's bill go through, the Community Oversight Board is not a part of the auditing function. I think those two statements can be a both and type of deal. I don't know what the rest of it says. But I think like that's the direction. I think if we identify the position that we voted on taking before and say Johnson's bill shouldn't go through because it doesn't have an oversight, we are not involved in it, I think that talks to we need to not do this type of deal, you know.
Judge Brown.
Well, I think you could basically have a resolution that would say, while the board has expressed concerns over the adoption of license plate readers, it's the board's strong view that if it is adopted, that the board have an oversight function. Will that get it? I'll move that.
You're a better writer than me.
So there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I second that.
Any focused discussion? If there is none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. I will write a letter to council. Another one. Any other new business or announcements?
I just want to say thank you to the board members who are leaving, or possibly not. I don't know, but I know this has been a tough year for us. We've had a lot of challenges with the MNCO, with the staff, and just with policing in general, especially when we think about the 10 people who have been shot. We want to center that, those who have had mental health conditions, and then the families of those people. And so you guys have always stood resilient and come to all of these meetings, and we have had a lot of meetings, lots of time. And I know that you all are doing this service because you love this community just as much as I do. And so I appreciate all of you and all the work that you've done and the many, many conversations that I've had with you. The times that I haven't said thank you, I just wanted to say thank you today for your service to this community. And your assistance to me personally, so thanks.
Thank you, Director Fitchard. If there's no other new business or announcements, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell-Gooch. Thank you, Della. Any focused discussion? If not, all in favor of adjourning the meeting, say aye. Aye. Thank you, everyone.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.